Everybody, it's Adam with ArcadeHeroes.com. If you can't hear me, let me know in the chat and I'll adjust it. But welcome to the live preview. I was just in the middle of getting some videos ready to go there, and so time flies by quickly when you're in the pre-stream. But coming to you from my arcade in West Valley City, Utah, called Arcade Galactic. I will be at Amusement Expo in Las Vegas tomorrow, so flying in the morning. Should be there in enough time for when the show starts. Let me adjust my mic here. Let me know if that works any better. Because I have had a few people asking if I will be there or not. Way in the past, I missed an Amusement Expo or two, just if it seemed like there wasn't anything really to talk about or see there, like maybe one brand new game that is going to show up. But at least in recent years, there seems to be more than just one new piece popping up. But if you're new to the arcade industry or just tuning in because you heard about some game that might be coming along that you're interested in. So Amusement Expo, it's an expo about amusement. It's a trade show focused on the arcade industry and all of that, where you have all the manufacturers of different arcade games coming together to show off their product. Now, their target audience, it's not actually the player, it's arcade operators like myself, people who own an arcade venue or run what's called a route operation, where they have, where they take equipment and put it in a different location, say like a restaurant, a movie theater lobby, a gas station, a rest stop, etc. FECs, which are family entertainment centers, just anybody who operates arcade equipment. That's who this show is for, to show off the different equipment that is becoming available for the spring and the summertime. And now I know some arcade businesses out there, the summer's actually slow for them. For others like myself, the summer is a busy time. And so, yeah, it's just catering to them to show, hey, this is what we got. Now, another trade show that you've seen me talk about many times on the channel here is called IAAPA. That's a much larger show, and while it does cater to that same audience that I just mentioned, it's far more international. It also looks more at theme parks and stuff like that, and so that's why you have all these rides there and giant inflatables and stuff like that at IAAPA, whereas Amusement Expo is not really for that, even though you would have theme parks with arcades and such. And I've even seen a few theme park people show up at Amusement Expo. It's just, again, a much smaller show and a little bit more focused on all that. And to your question, Matt, yes. And so I guess I should be plugging my works and such, my books. So right now I am in the research and development process of writing a new book. This would be my third one about arcades, but this one is a history book, and it actually started off as a trivia book, but as I was putting all these questions, I had over 1,200 questions. I was like, you know, a lot of this stuff might be way too esoteric, and so why not also provide background, provide history on all that? And it was a little bit daunting because it's like, holy crap, to cover the entire history of the arcade industry in a single book, it might be massive, but well, I've already finished the section on the 1970s, and I'm currently working on the 1980s, and so I'll be done eventually. I don't know when, so I won't make any promises as to that. But yes, every chapter will focus on a company, and so you have a chapter on Atari, a chapter on Midway, a chapter on Century, you have one on exA-Arcadia, Cinematronics, all that stuff. And I found out a lot of very interesting information and busted some old myths that I believed. You know, like a lot of people still believe that Space Invaders caused a yen shortage in Japan. That's not true. Of course, I did know about that one previously. But there's some other very interesting things, and I've reached out to a lot of people in the industry that I know to get their feedback. I've shared some chapters and say like, hey, is there anything here that's wrong? Gotten a little feedback and corrections on there already, and there's more people that I'll reach out to. It just depends on when I get there. And so hopefully it'll be a cool book that people will enjoy, and I wouldn't mind making a mobile game out of it too, like an arcade trivia question game out of it too, but we'll get to that bridge when we reach it. But thanks for the question. Let me grab some drinks here. So I just remembered I'm going to be talking a lot. So I might as well wet my whistle so that I can... yes, I won't forget to promote this one. When it comes to self-promotion, it's like I see all this stuff that YouTubers often do. Be sure to like and subscribe and hit the little bell button and all that crap. And it's just so annoying because it's like everybody does that, everybody knows and whatnot. But it's like I guess when it comes to things that you spend hours and hours and hours on developing, like a book, probably should pump it up a little bit more than than what I do. I just don't. I don't want to bug people, I guess. But anyways, let's get into what's coming to Amusement Expo here in Las Vegas. Now, Amusement Expo already did start, technically. It started on yesterday, but what they have are educational seminars and things like that. And so actually right now, Eugene Jarvis should have just started a seminar on what makes for great VR arcade games or something like that. And so he's down there talking about Godzilla VR, which is actually the first game we'll be talking about here that you can see on my screen, as well as other VR games. And so Raw Thrills, they are an advertiser on the Arcade Heroes website, as you can see right there. They've supported the site for a very long time, and I'm very grateful to them for that. It was a kind of a surreal experience. One of the first, I think it was the second Amusement Expo I went to, and I was visiting the Raw Thrills booth, and they said, Eugene wants to talk to you. And it's like, what, me? I'm a nobody, you know, why would he want to talk to me? You know, I want to talk to him. But Eugene's an awesome guy, always great insight, and so I wish I was there for this particular seminar, even though I'm not big on VR games, as I've talked about before. It is a little surprising to me just how hard Raw Thrills has turned into VR, but the reason why they are going at it so hard is because they see it as a way to distinguish the arcade experience from what you get at home. Now, yes, you can get VR at home, but what Eugene sees in this technology, or any technology really that can set itself apart, is like you can add things to the VR experience in the arcade that you can't add at home. Now that's true of console versus arcade in general as well, but just when it comes to, like, you know, what you see here, it's more than just the headset. It's the moving seat, it's the wind effects, it's the surround sound, it's the controls, all that stuff. And so hey guys, how's it going? How can I help you? Just getting tokens there. Okay. If there's anything off that you want to play, let me know, but I assume you're just here for maximum too.
This dollar has like tape on it because it's ripped.
Oh,
will that fit in there?
It probably will reject it, but I can still give you tokens. You want all 5?
Yeah.
Okay. There you go.
Thanks.
Yeah, no problem. I'm gonna take off my jacket here. Getting a little toasty. Yeah, when it comes to Godzilla Kaiju Wars VR, it's supposed to have 5 levels, or 5 chapters as they call it, on there. And I don't know if all 5 chapters are going to be available right off the bat. There was only 2 at IAPA, and so I haven't heard anything as to how many additional chapters might be available here. But if you buy a Godzilla Kaiju Wars VR machine, you're supposed to get all the chapters eventually. Although that's similar to what they said with King Kong But King Kong, they ended up putting chapters 4 and 5 into King Kong 2. But from what they said at IAPA is that they weren't going to do the same thing with Godzilla, that the intention was that if all 5 chapters weren't available when this starts hitting production, that they still were going to offer the remaining chapters to people who bought the machine for free without doing an upgrade kit or anything like that. But the pricing on this one, it depends on your distributor, but you're looking at somewhere between in the $40,000 to $50,000 range, probably closer to $50,000, especially after you look at shipping, taxes, that stuff. And that, like, right there, that's the biggest problem that I have with VR, just in general, not just Raw Thrills, but just any of these, is how expensive they are. And it's like it's fine for big chains like Round One USA and Dave & Buster's and even Chuck E. Cheese's, like they can afford this stuff, but a small person like myself, it's like $50,000. How many other regular arcade machines can I buy for that price? Yeah, that's the big question that I look at. Like any business owner, or if anybody out there is considering getting into the arcade business, you have to look at the return on investment. Now, when you're talking about a product that costs over $20,000, it's already we're looking like, well, I hope this thing can pay itself off in a year, but that's more likely going to be 3 years or 5 years or even longer. And that's something that I've talked about with pinball that is a problem, where pinball, especially where the price on those has been going up, they used to be $5,400 to start. Now they're about $7,000 to start. What I see them taking in every year, it's like these things take 8 to 10 years to pay themselves off. Now, yes, they're good to resell. So in that regard, they're decent investments. But there's always a big risk with any video game or any product like this, where it maybe starts earning well at first, but then it doesn't earn well over the long run, and then it doesn't pay itself off in a reasonable amount of time. And that's what happened with my Star Wars Battle Pod, which was the most expensive game that I've ever invested in. After all the financing stuff and shipping and tax, etc., it was something like $37,000, which I still, I had many people tell me, you are crazy for buying one of those. And I couldn't foresee what would happen to the Star Wars IP, that people would just stop becoming indifferent towards it after Disney really dropped the ball there. But it actually earned well up until about The Last Jedi, and then it noticeably dropped off a cliff, and then it stopped generating enough every month to cover its own bills, and that's when I eventually decided to just sell it off. But it was still a very cool experience. As for why prices are this high, I mean, VR in particular, there's very few VR games out there that don't cost close to $50,000 or higher. Like when we get way down here to the VR section, I guess since I'm talking about it, I might as well just go over some of these already. But I'm not really aware of any of these that are below $25,000. There might be something like this, the Coliseum VR foosball table, that might be. I'm not 100% sure on that. But like this VR 360 Actions OMG simulator, I think those are $30,000. The InnoWise Cubics, which is actually not a virtual reality simulator, it's an immersive game room. I think those are in the range of $50,000 to $60,000. Hologate arenas, those are somewhere around $100,000. And I'm not sure how much Hero Zone VR, which is a open free roam arena, so you're not tethered to anything. I don't know for sure what the price is on that. But yeah, a lot of it's R&D, the hardware to get everything working right. And then, of course, a lot of these have their own exclusive software into them that it costs a lot of money to develop that software. Going back to Godzilla, all the way up here. I mean, in the past, Eugene Jarvis had said that the development of an arcade machine like Terminator Salvation cost about $4 million. And that was just the development process. That does not include manufacturing. Now, when it comes to manufacturing an arcade machine, when you go to a factory and you say, okay, I have this product that I want you guys to build for me and I need 500 units, they require that you pay for all of it up front. So you have to buy every screw, every bolt, every piece of wood, the artwork, the TVs, the molds, everything. And that costs several $1 million depending on how many of those units you're going to be manufacturing, and possibly more. And so all of this has to get covered somehow. And with VR, it's really been pushing that price level up a lot higher, plus inflation, plus the shipping problems that have existed out there. And so, yeah, that's where it's just been very difficult to find anything. There's also the licensing costs. You know, like Raw Thrills has rarely done something that isn't licensed. They have, like the most recent one that I can think of would be Nitro Trucks. Although I should mention that, let's open this in a new tab. So this is supposed to also be at the show, T-Rex Safari VR Adventure, which I really thought that they were going to get the Jurassic Park license for this, but they decided not to. Again, it's a little surprising, but at the same time, it's dinosaurs. You don't really need the Jurassic Park license to make it pay itself off, but it certainly helps, and that's Raw Thrills' stance. You know, ever since they developed the first Fast and Furious game, it was originally just going to be called something like Hot Cars, but somebody said, well, why don't we just get like a car license like Fast and Furious and throw it on here? And it's like, yeah, that's a good idea, and it helped, even though the game itself had absolutely nothing to do with the Fast and Furious movies. But yeah, so lots of VR will be there from Raw Thrills. So you have the Godzilla Kaiju Wars, King Kong 2, T-Rex Safari VR Adventure, and MotoGP VR. I wouldn't expect there to be anything else that hasn't been announced. Like the one, since the industry hasn't seen this wasn't at IAPA. I'm guessing this and Godzilla are gonna be the big push. I mean, could there be a surprise? Yeah. I mean, there have been times where Raw Thrills just shows up out of nowhere and suddenly they have some surprise there, and I that's usually more frequent at IAPA, however, than it is at Amusement Expo, and so because of that, I'm not really expecting a big surprise, but at this point I wouldn't be surprised if they do Big Buck VR. It's just because they're very much into it. I did ask about Series 3 for Minecraft Dungeons Arcade. I kind of got a non-answer on that one, so I guess if it's there, it's there. If it's not, then just have to keep waiting and see when it is they're going to roll those out. But I'll still ask about it face-to-face. Usually you can get better answers that way. And speaking of Big Buck, Play Mechanics did just announce the Big Buck Championships, which are happening in Chicago on October 11th and 12th. So there's over $100,000 in cash prizes available for that, and anybody can participate. I mean, there might be some countries that don't have Big Buck Hunter, but if you go to any Big Buck Reloaded machine and play on the Pro mode, you can start earning points to qualify to go to that. So yeah, Raw Thrills does not have their own factory. They generally work with some different factories, and they've used more than one in the past. There's one, I think, called Baytek that they've used a lot. They worked with Unis for a while. So actually, if you look at the credits on Raw Thrills games, they usually will say which factory they use. Like they'll say it in the thanks, or it'll be under manufacturing or something like that. But like Unis actually manufactured Batman for them. The Aliens game I know was Baytek. I think they might have used Fun Company before, but Baytek and Fun Company are both based out of the United States. Unis, of course, is Chinese. But yeah, there's not exactly a Raw Thrills or a Sega factory. They generally do contract things out to third parties just because it's a little easier and cheaper that way, usually. But still, like I said, if you are building an arcade machine, you literally have to buy every single component first before they will start building them, and whatever number you're going to make, whether it's 100 or 500 units, you have to pay for it up front. There's no credit of pay here in 90 days or anything like that. And so that has to be covered somehow. And then the pricing on the game, that doesn't include the markup that distributors put on it, because direct sales, say from the factory to the buyer, are pretty rare. That's always been an issue because the distributors, if a distributor, say like Betson or Primetime Amusements, if your buyers are going straight to the factory and not through them, then they're going to go out of business. And so that's where they fight tooth and nail to make sure that there's no direct sales. But direct sales still happen once in a while, usually with indie developers, but when you're talking about these bigger companies like Raw Thrills, you're having to go through a distributor, and then they have a markup that can be anywhere from 7 to 30%. It just depends on the product and it depends on the distributor. But yeah, and now generally speaking, the more units you build, the lower the price can be. But you don't see that happen as much in the arcade industry just because it is rare that you get a machine that's making, say, more than 10,000 units. The last time I heard of a game that reached over 10,000 manufactured units was Cruisin' Blast. But a lot of the other games are maybe several hundred units. Sometimes you might get a couple thousand, but the numbers generally aren't there to reduce the cost from that mass production. But there's some things there that I'm not 100% sure on. These are things that I've gleaned from conversations over the years, but hopefully that gives you kind of an idea as to the costs and stuff. Hold on here. Hi.
Are you doing your own studio?
Yeah, kind of, sort of. Just like a live stream talking about arcade games. Do you want all 5?
Yes, please.
Okay. What game are you looking to play?
Metal Slug?
Okay, yeah. I'll get that on. Be right back.
What's that?
Alrighty. But, yeah, when it comes to arcade prices, I mean, that's something that I really want to see start coming down, but it's hard to see the prices coming down when you keep having these big releases that are costing $50,000 or something like that. Before the pandemic and before inflation really started kicking the crap out of all prices everywhere, the average cost on an arcade machine was about $7,500. But now I would say it's pretty much double that because it's rare where I hear about a machine that isn't starting at $12,000 to $15,000 for like a racing game or something like that. And so it makes it kind of a pain because, like, yeah, you look at on the Raw Thrills ad here, MotoGP VR. I can't remember what those are per unit. I want to say 23,000 each. The Halo Fireteam Raven was 24,000. The Fast and Furious is 25,000. On the wall up here, I'm not sure what Asphalt Moto Blitz is. I can't remember. But the Storm Rider 2, those are like $32,000. But you get 2 of them in one. And so, yeah, it becomes very difficult to invest into brand new equipment when all the equipment is just so freaking expensive. But anyways, that's Raw Thrills. Next up, the other advertiser on the site is Touch Magics. They're based out of India, and they do have some facilities here in the States. So this is their booth at IAPA, where they debuted Crazy Prize, which is a capsule prize game where you push a button to try and knock the prize into the target hole, and if you do, you get the prize. Pretty straightforward. But as an island-style game, you can play it from any side. So that should be there. Their new Pop It Redemption game, where you're trying to drop the ball into the colored holes for tickets, should be there too. I guess I need better footage. And then some of their other staples like Space Warp 66, Mega Blaster, and such. But if we roll up here to the ad that you've probably seen, they're debuting the new Pudgy Penguins Polar Challenge. So it was last year they announced that they did a license deal with Pudgy Penguins, the NFT, which I don't know much about NFTs. You know, a little bit here and there, but I don't think that this game has anything to do with NFTs. I think it's just using the characters of the Pudgy Penguins. And it looks like a relatively simple game. But I asked and I didn't get any details as to how the game plays itself. So we'll find out when I get to the show. But that's everything that will be at their booth, booth number 209. Oh, and I should mention this too. If you go to a map of Amusement Expo and you look around, poke around, you'll notice that it doesn't say Raw Thrills anywhere. And this is the case at every trade show. I don't think I've ever seen Raw Thrills have their own booth. They always appear at the Betson Enterprises booth. And so Raw Thrills this year, I mean, Betson's always pretty close to the front. They're not right there at the front. It's usually Bandai Namco. This year you also have Smart Industries right there where they would have their JJ Bot crane machine, a $50,000 crane that was just released. I have a video of this on the channel from IAPA where it has a robot arm like they would use in car factories, but it has a screen attached to it and a character that interacts with you. And so the final production version of that's shipping now, and it should be there. But they're right up front, and Sega's pretty close to the front, although their booth is a little smaller than I thought. Huh. Interesting, but we'll get to Sega. But yeah, so Raw Thrills, they are booth 327, which again is Betson. But those are the advertisers. While Wallop is advertising on the site, they do not have a booth, but there is another company that represents a lot of their products, so I'll get to them in a moment. So, starting with the A's for video game and pinball makers, we have Adrenaline Amusements. So, at IAPA, they debuted their dragon riding game, or kind of a light gun game slash ride in a way, because it does have a motion seat, and you shoot at targets as you're flying through, as you can see here. But the interesting or odd thing about it is that you can't die in the game. And so the only way to get a game over is to reach the boss. When you reach the boss, it's where it says swipe card or insert coins to continue. And then if you do that, you can defeat the boss, and then you play through the next level. And then when you get to the next boss, that's when you have to pay again. And so different way of trying things for all that. So if you get hit, like that person did just there, all it does is detract from your score. It's just the thing that it's kind of bugged me about this game and some of the other Adrenaline games is there's no leaderboards. And so after you've finished the game, you see your score, and then that's it. You never see it again. So, yeah.
Can you turn house into the door?
Sure. It'll take just a couple moments to boot up. But as soon as it shows the game. Sorry, sometimes mornings here are absolutely dead, and then sometimes they're oddly busy for an hour, and then it suddenly dies. And so today is the latter. Now, the coolest thing about Drakens is that it uses an LED screen, like those teeny tiny LEDs. Can't really tell on the video here because it's also running in it's running in potato quality. Maybe if I bump it up, you can kind of sort of see it. Yeah, you can kind of see there with all the streaks in the screen. But yeah, so like what this is aiming for is like there's these very popular rides. They're basically roller coasters, virtual roller coasters that you've probably seen or maybe you've even played out there, like Typhoon. There's been Storm VR, there's Virtual Rabbids. And so this is aiming for that segment of the market, which is very lucrative. If you look at Replay Magazine, which is a trade mag for this industry, they will post these different earnings, or not the earnings themselves, but the performance of games from across the industry. And games like that just do insanely well. I used to have a Tsunami Sumo ride, which had multiple games in it, and it had a motion seat. It was one of the first motion seat games. And one of the things you could select was a roller coaster, and somebody just put a camera on the front of a roller coaster in Ohio and filmed it, and then programmed the effects of the seat to coincide with what you saw on screen. And I had some other actual games on there, such as Mech Warrior 4 and a couple of others that I can't remember. But if I looked at the bookkeeping stats of which games got played the most, the 3 roller coaster rides killed it. They made like 5 times as much as any video game did. It's sad to me as a gamer that that's the case, but it's just, that's the reality. Sometimes you don't even need it to be interactive. And so like if you've noticed here on the gameplay, it's very much like a roller coaster. Now obviously sometimes it stops and stuff, and of course, yeah, you have roller coasters that stop. So this is a little bit more video gamified, but that's the segment of the market it's aiming for. And this is another game that's also somewhere in the realm of like $35,000. Now I have seen and heard about a variation where they replaced this LED screen with just a standard like 70 or 80 inch LCD screen. I think that was shown off at EAG over in Europe, over in London, sorry. And that's a way for this game to be available at a lower cost than that. But yeah, like Arcade Z says in the chat, the Typhoon, the Mad Wave Motions, the Virtual Rabbids, King Kong, all these things which are basically either just virtual roller coasters or slightly interactive virtual roller coasters, usually make a crap load of money. And that was actually kind of what Star Wars Battle Pod was, as I mentioned that I had one, and also at first it did really well. And when I really analyzed the gameplay, it's like, this is just a roller coaster ride where you can shoot at stuff. But how you shot at stuff didn't really affect the gameplay. It didn't really end the ride or anything like that. And so, yeah, that's been a popular thing that works. And so, and I've seen from what I've heard, the earnings on Drakens is pretty good. But as far as Adrenaline goes, I don't know of anything else new that they'll be showing off. They probably won't, but sometimes they show up with a surprise. Yeah, I had the Battle Pod, so it was the one with the dome screen and everything. It was really cool, and that was the main reason I got it. Is like, you know, I think with the Star Wars name, which at the time was still good, and the technology of that it was going to make a killing. It's just like I said, unfortunately, when a lot of people just became turned off to Star Wars, I just saw the earnings drop. And funny enough, though, once in a while, I still get people coming in asking where the Battle Pod is. It's like, or they'll say after I said, well, I'm sorry, I sold it. Oh, I played that game all the time. And it's like, well, I guess you didn't play it enough, because not from what the earnings said. Oh, well. Next up is Alan 1. Bonus points to anybody who happens to know what that's a reference to. But they were at Amusement Expo last year. That's where they made their debut. They're actually local to me. The CEO of the company, or I think he's the CEO, or he's the founder of the company. He runs an arcade, a retro arcade, up in Roy, Utah, which is about 40 minutes north of me, not too far from where I had my second location that I closed down a little while ago. But he is getting into the arcade manufacturing business, and as I mentioned on the on a post last night, I was actually expecting the news to be to have the embargo lifted this morning, but it actually turned out that Atari posted to their Twitter that they were about this game, or the new game. But as you might have seen already, Asteroids Recharged is coming to arcades, and that's through this company called Alan One. Now, at Amusement Expo last year, Alan One had their game Avian Nights, which I guess I did not post a photo of. Avian Nights is basically a new age joust. It can handle between 2 to 4 players, and so they will have a new version of that. In fact, actually, you can see it right here in the background behind the asteroids there. The cabinets are actually the same design, and so if you remember the Avian Nights design from last year, it had these big grills on it for wind effects, and so they changed that, and now it happens underneath the control panel, and so there's nothing there where people could spill a drink or stick their hand in there to get it hurt or anything, but you still feel wind effects blowing on your hands while you're playing, and that'll be on Asteroids Recharged as well as on Avian Nights. But I had the chance to go out to Tooele, Utah, and visit what they called Area 52. That's this place you see here, and so that's what they call their facility, because out in Tooele there's a bit of like UFO sightings. There's some army bases out there. One that's fairly well known is called Dugway. That's where they destroyed all the chemical weapons that the United States used to have. But there's like lots of testing grounds, so like the Air Force will go out there and blow stuff up in the desert sometimes. Not in the city, of course, but just in the Tooele Desert that's further west. And so because of that and the UFO sightings that happened, they call it Area 52. But yeah, I had the chance to see this production facility. So it's the first time I'd actually been to a place where they were building arcade cabinets. And so that gave me some good insight into the process of what it takes. Now, of course, where these guys are newcomers, obviously their operations are not quite as large as some of those other companies that I had mentioned that do stuff for Raw Thrills and many others. But still, it was very, very impressive to see their setup. They had a CNC routing machine. They had a super nice printer. I had never seen anything like it. I think the one guy told me it was something around $300,000. But they were able to cut out the pieces of the cabinet, and then they can print on it using this really nice printer, but the prints are just fantastic quality. In fact, they have texture to them, and they can print extra layers on top. And so if you look at the Avian Nights cabinet, if you are at the show, you can see that and feel it for yourself. But unfortunately, I didn't get a chance to play Asteroids because when I was there, the cabinets were still, like the control panels hadn't been installed yet. Some of the wiring wasn't installed. They said, hey, do you want to help us out on this? And it's like, sure, I'm here. I wouldn't mind saying that I had a hand in building a prototype arcade cabinet since I'd never done that before. So I put some T-molding on one of the Asteroids cabinets and installed a little bit of audio cabling. That's all I had time for. And so, but yeah, I didn't get a chance to actually play the game. But the game has been changed from the console version. The guys behind this at Alan One are serious Atari fans. I posted on Twitter that some photos that I took from a building that's right next to this Area 52 that they call the Hangar, and it's just filled with arcade machines. In fact, if I go to my Twitter here and media, so like this is in that building. It used to be a furniture reselling store or something like that, but now it's just wall to wall with old arcade machines. And it's just absolutely crazy going in there. I wish I lived a little bit closer to go visit it more frequently. But I got a chance to play Solvaloo, I got a chance to play Space Lords, some Hercules. I just didn't have enough time to go through and play everything that I wanted to really play. But they have some real gems there, and some super rarities like a Missile Command cockpit cabinet, an Omega Race cockpit. Just crazy some of the stuff that these guys have. But yeah, a sit-down version of Astron Belt by Sega, which I didn't even know that like the sit-down version existed. They have the captain's chair version of Sega Star Trek. That was kind of like a cockpit version of that game, and just some crazy cool history in that building. But those would be the Allen 1 people. And again, this is basically Atari is coming back to the business through Allen 1. They were telling me they're working directly with people at Atari, including Tim Lapentino, who did the Art of Atari book and who just recently joined Atari as their creative art director. And so they'll be signing off on changes and stuff. But again, this will play differently. I just don't know for sure yet how different it will play compared to the console version, which was fine for a $10 game, but it wasn't as good as the original Asteroids. And of course, Avian Knights. I know all the attention keeps going to Asteroids, but Avian Knights, which is like Joust, will be there. All right, next up is American Pinball, and so they are one of two pinball companies that'll be at the show. Surprisingly, Chicago Gaming will not be there, and this is the first Amusement Expo that I think they'll have missed in a long time, and I don't know why. They decided not to come to this one. They were there last year, and that's the first chance I got to see Pulp Fiction. But yeah, for some reason they're not going. But American Pinball will be there, and they have not only Galactic Tank Force, which debuted at last year's AEI, but also the brand new and already shipping Barry-O's Barbecue Challenge, which is a barbecue-themed pinball machine designed by Barry Orsler, who passed away, I think it was in 2022. And so this would be his last design, and that's who Barry-O is, in case you're wondering. So he was a prolific pinball designer. He designed Space Shuttle for Williams, which was one of the real game changers back in the 80s for pinball. It turned the tide. Yeah, their place could be Galloping Ghost Arcade, and they were talking about wanting to open that place up to the public. It's just the real problem is the building's a little bit run down, and just also the amount of power. And so it's like the amount of money it would take to turn that place into a Galloping Ghost would be pretty high. So I guess if they're if the Asteroids and Avian Knights sell really well, perhaps they would have the money to do that. But yeah, with American Pinball, there's a few places out there that already have this new one, but this will be the first chance that I have to give a crack at it, and so I'm looking forward to it. I really tip my hat to American Pinball as they keep doing non-licenses, and I kind of like that. I mean, granted, it does seem like non-licenses do not perform as well as licenses, and where pinball already doesn't perform that great, at least in my location, it's kind of hard to know if I should really invest in that. But still, just in general, I love seeing somebody try and be more creative, because in my view, licenses, they can be a little more limiting for creativity. Because, I mean, granted, you can be creative with the license and stuff, but there's still certain things that you might not be able to do just because the licensor says, oh, I don't think that fits with our brand voice or whatever. Whereas if you're just making your own thing up from scratch, you have to be 100% creative in every aspect about that to make it a compelling game that people will come back to. And so that's the side of non-licensed pinball machines that I really appreciate. Moving on is Amusement Source International, and so this is kind of not really a manufacturer and not really a distributor. They're kind of a blend between the two. They're more of an importer, and they like to import games from various Chinese companies like Ace Amusements, Wallop, and some others. They had an impressive booth at IAPA where it wasn't very big, but they somehow crammed games into almost every square inch of that place. It was really impressive. just how many games they had in their small space. But this game right here is the one that generally gets most of the attention, the Sniper Strike 2, because it's basically Silent Scope with 4 players. But the guns are much cooler than what Silent Scope ever had. They have like pneumatic feedback and stuff. Now, Amusement Source does focus a lot more on redemption stuff than they do video games, which makes sense to a degree because, you know, what sells well, what earns the best in this industry are ticket redemption games, unfortunately. So that's why you have a lot of that stuff. So I would assume that they're going to have a similar booth. They had been pretty active on social media up until IAPA, and then they've just gone fairly quiet. Although Corey Haynes, who runs Amusement Source, he did make a comment on a LinkedIn post that I made saying that Skyriders Deluxe will be there, which is right here. And so this is basically like Prop Cycle, but the deluxe version is just larger so that adults can play it. Yeah. Yeah. There you go.
These $3.25 for $1.
There you go. Yeah, no problem. So yeah, there we go. That's the prop cycle aspect of Skyriders, and then other games. But you know, it's always possible that Amusement Source could have a surprise there. Again, since they don't really announce what they're bringing in advance, they could have something new. Like at this show, they had a few new things, including the Parkour Motor 2, which is like Superbikes 2. They also had the Zombies Crisis game, which is basically a House of the Dead clone. So yeah, they will be there at booth 607, and we will see what they have. Next up in the A's is Andamiro USA, and thankfully they shared this image on social media as to what they're bringing to the show, so it's not a mystery whatsoever. So they have 3 brand new games that they're debuting. They've reskinned Tic-Shac-Toe to just be Tic-Tac-Toe Basketball Challenge. There's Wacky Racer, which is a SpongeBob SquarePants themed whack-a-mole style game. We just call them whackers. And so there's some wordplay there with Wacky Racer and Whacker game. And then there's Crazy Balls, which is another redemption game where you're trying to collect the color balls for your color zone and such. Hi, can I help you?
Can we get some tokens?
Okay. Here you go. If there's anything that's off that you want to play, let me know. I can turn it on for you. Thank you, Matt. Thanks for watching where you could. Did I freeze? Can you hear me? Okay. I don't know why my computer's doing this sometimes lately. Let me make sure I don't have anything running in the background that might be causing some freezing problems, but try and keep an eye on that. Anybody wondering where's Pump It Up? Well, for some reason, Andamiro doesn't like to bring Pump It Up to Amusement Expo anymore. The game's still in production. It's still for sale. But, yeah, for some reason, they just don't bring it to the show. And maybe it's because of shipping. And maybe it's because in the past they just haven't seen a lot of sales come out of going to Amusement Expo with that particular game, and they find that there's more interest in their redemption product than there is in their video game product. And so that would be my best guess. But I can ask in case anybody's wondering why it isn't there. But that's a guess. Now we get to the B's. Bandai Namco Amusement America. I'll just call them BAMCO. They certainly should have Dead Heat Unleashed there, because if you go to the Amusement Expo floor map and you click on their profile, it mentions Jukebox Bolorama, it mentions Class of 81, Dead Heat Unleashed, and everything. They've been very quiet on social media as well as on their website. So I don't know for certain what it is that they're going to have at the show, but we can make a good guess because we have seen in recent times. I'll let that play while I talk. So there's been 3 games that they've had on location test out there. They have Bike Dash Delivery, which is like Crazy Taxi meets Prop Cycle. They have Goldstorm Pirates, the sequel to Dead Storm Pirates. And then there's Taiko no Tatsujin USA version. Now, none of these games have showed up at any trade show yet. So could they show up as a surprise at this one? Maybe. So if you're on the Arcade Heroes Discord channel, I did post a kind of an emoji poll that you can take if you want to vote on that, if you think one of these will be there. It seems like most are thinking that Bike Dash Delivery will be there, maybe Goldstorm Pirates. Goldstorm, from what I was told, is looking to launch at the very end of this year, possibly even the beginning of 2025, just depending on how development goes. And so that's where there is still a chance it might not show up here because they might think it's too early, but just depends. Like, what they feel is going to be best for their buyers. Yeah, that's why Goldstorm wasn't at IAPA, is because they said, well, it's just too early. We don't want to be promoting this thing that you can't buy for a year. And so while we're closer to its release now, it's still a little bit of a ways out. So perhaps it won't get there. But I'll be right back. I've got some people wanting more games. Sure, I'll probably gain some sort of award or record for host who leaves his live stream the most on YouTube. Now one thing to mention about Bandai Namco is that at Amusement Expo, they do not have products from other manufacturers there like they do at IAPA. The reason that they do have stuff like this at IAPA that's not theirs is because of Bandai Namco Amusements Europe, which goes to IAPA, and that arm of Bamco is a distributor. They sell things into Europe, and so they're just, since they're not at Amusement Expo, there's no reason for them to represent those other products there. Baytek will be there at booth 727. Or actually, yeah, also in the chat, let me know, what do you think of these 3 games from Bamco might be at the show, or if none of them will be. What do you think? Baytek, they used to bring a lot of surprises to these shows. Like if you look on my channel way back in the ancient days before I had a tripod, and it was all shaky cam video that I'm embarrassed to even bring up, they would just pop up with a game at random at Amusement Expo, like Battleship, and then you'd never see it again. Now, it seems like they've stopped doing that, maybe just because it's caused them too much of a headache where people keep asking them, well, I was interested in this game that you showed off, where is it? And it was like, oh, we canceled that or whatever. And so, yeah, they've changed how they do things, but I'm sure it'll still be a fairly busy booth. Let's see if we can find them. That's 727. So they're a little bit in the center-ish there. It's a big booth, 70 by 20. So, yeah, I'm sure it'll be packed just like their IAPA one was. And they also just bought up a VR company called Hyperdeck, and so they now have the SpongeBob SquarePants Dynamic Duo ride game. They debuted Goats and Ropes at IAPA, which is this goat mountain climbing game, but you have this real rope that you pull on to climb the mountain and stuff. But whether or not they'll have something new there, I don't know. Coastal Amusements. This company, I think they're out of New Jersey. It's either New Jersey or North Carolina, somewhere out east. They will be there. Let's see, booth 513. How big is that one? Oh yeah, 50 by 20. So a little bit smaller than Baytek's, but still fairly large. Actually bigger than Sega's booth, at least for this time. But they usually have a lot of video redemption products, videmption as I like to call it. This game right here, Surf League, is supposed to start shipping in the next few weeks. And so I assume we'll see a finalized version there. They also have their Bullseye Crack Shot, light gun target shooting game. Could they have another surprise? Sure, it's possible. They've been doing a lot more stuff with Ace Amusements, a Chinese company that I mentioned before, and so it's possible that they could grab something else from them and offer it up. It's just sometimes Coastal does show off games that end up not getting mass produced. There's been one redemption game that they brought to the past two shows that I went to. They brought it to IAPA. They had it at Amusement Expo 2023, but they still don't have it listed on their website, and that's Road Trip. And I don't know why they haven't released that. It must not be performing as well as they like, and that's usually why a game just doesn't get released. We got the Elaut Group, which is 3 companies: Elaut USA, Benchmark Games International, and Coast to Coast Entertainment. I haven't heard anything about what they might have or what they might be bringing. At IAPA, they did debut several new games, like Benchmark had a new boxing machine, a kickboxer. They had their VRX arcade machine, which was a medieval VR game that's a little weird called Golden Mace. But they finally got that out. They had a new Superman game. They had Smurfs-themed coin pusher and crane machine. They had a new air hockey table. It's just, you go to their website and most of that stuff's not listed. So why Coastal does this too, where they might be selling something but they don't list it on their website. And it's like, I don't understand why. If you're a manufacturer, I would think you would want to have all your products that you're trying to sell right now that are in production, that you've paid millions of dollars for, to be front and center and trying to get those sold. But why you have different companies like this do this behavior where it's like, just talk to our distributor and let them worry about it. I don't know. It makes no sense to me. Next up in Ease is exA-Arcadia. And so they did skip IAPA, although from my understanding it was due to a problem with the booth setup where the IAPA show themselves like double booked the space or something, and it was going to force them to go outside, and they just didn't want to do that. So yes, they will be at the show. I've been told they'll have 36 games available. Now, one thing to keep in mind is out of those 36, most of those will be games that are already available for their system. If you haven't heard of it before, exA-Arcadia is like a modern Neo Geo. So it has cartridges that you can plug in, and up to 4 cartridges at a time. From what they've told me, is the only really new thing that they will debut there is the close to production version of Jitsu Squad. Now, they've shown Jitsu Squad in the past. In fact, that's the video that I put up here, where even with this earlier build, you could see how it was different, where the enemies are a lot easier to kill, because in the console version, they're in the shmup space, you would call them bullet sponges, where they just take tons and tons and tons of damage. But in the arcade version, fortunately, it does not take 5 minutes to kill a fodder enemy. I'm exaggerating a little bit on the console version, of course, but still, sometimes it feels like that. And so, yeah, this one, just the flow of the game, the pace is a lot more arcade-like. But there is a character that is being exclusively added to this from a 90s cartoon. I can't say what it is yet, but tomorrow I will have a post. I'll do a scheduled post. It'll go up, and that's when it'll be unveiled what it is or who it is. But it'll be interesting to see what people's reactions are to it. I honestly I was not familiar with the character. I
hadn't heard of them because I think when they were on TV, I was already well out of my cartoon watching phase. But yeah, that'll be there. You guys, please take it easy on the shifters. Every freaking day, I have to say that. Huh? Oh, sure. Be right back. Now, I have been told that even though they won't be on the show floor, I will get a chance to see some of the games that are going to be announced at EVO Japan 2024. And so can't say yet what those are. Certain things are on embargo. But there's a lot of fighting games coming to the platform. There are a couple of names among those that I think will turn some heads, particularly in arcades, which is what you want. They are also doing more fighting games that are 3D fighters, or like 2.5D, I guess you could say, where the graphics are in 3D, but the fighting plane is on a 2D level. So, more like a traditional fighter, but with modern graphics. That's something I like. I think that's the more of what we need, because at least from what I see, my 3D or my 2.5D fighters on my X's get a lot more attention, get more play than the hand-drawn 2D stuff. And so looking forward to that. But there's a couple of other games that they mentioned there that are going to be very, very interesting. But also I need to mention that exa is going to be getting some advertising with Arcade Heroes, and so I will have a few more videos of some certain things and possibly access to a couple more games to show off or preview here soon. And so I'll be getting something from the show as a part of that deal. But yeah, they will be there, and they're actually pretty close to the front. So last time they were way in the back, but this time, yeah, right here, booth 553, 10 by 20 booth, right across from LAI Games, who has a 30 by 60 booth. Yeah, as far as the rarity of exa goes, I think it's one of those things that requires build-up time. One of the things that they will have at this show is a cabinet that is supposed to appeal to operators. Now, yes, this cabinet has been out for a little while already, but as long as the price stays good and competitive, which I think it is, then it's able to get out there into more places. But it just comes down to earnings. If they can show strong earnings, then more operators will pick it up, and then it'll become a lot easier to find the games. But I totally hear you on that, where it's a little difficult to find. But if you go over to Arcade Belgium, they do have an exa map where it can maybe help you find locations that have certain exa games on site. So yeah, there is that, at least. All right, next up we have Ice. It's pretty disappointing, IAPA from Ice, because they just didn't do anything different. In fact, they had like a little bit less at IAPA 2023 compared to IAPA 2022. But sometimes there's just, I guess, development lulls where you just don't have something ready to go to a show. And so they did recently announce a new Quarterback Pro American football game, a ball toss game for Ticket Redemption, and then Double Dribble, a basketball game for kids. And so those certainly will be there. There might also be a redemption game called Forest Jump, which was at Deal, but we're not 100% sure if that was an Ice game or if it was somebody else. Then we have IGPM Group, where these guys are mainly into boxing games, boxing machines, but a couple of years back they debuted this MMA boxer. Not talk over myself there. which is a neat little concept and variation. And I like what they did with the LED screen, particularly showing all this punching going on from animated GIFs. And so that's cool. Whether or not they'll have something new there, I mean, maybe. This game was originally called Hit the Green, and it debuted at an Amusement Expo, just showed up out of nowhere. And that was like 2 or 3 years ago. But they've keep changing it, and so now it has the LED screen and stuff, while keeping the same kind of concept going. Incredible Technologies will be there at booth 672. Let me see. Yeah, they have a decent sized booth. I just have no idea if they have anything new that's coming there. Recently on Replay Magazine, it's been saying that their arcade collection has actually been #1 earner out there, and so that's doing well. And obviously they do Golden Tee, that always does well. It's just they released a new version of Golden Tee PGA Tour, and it was so low key I didn't even know about it until like a month after it happened last year. And so I'll definitely have to go by and check and ask, like, hey, is there a new version of Golden Tee that's out now, or is it here? And find out for sure. But I don't follow Golden Tee very much. There's always these whole list of changes that happen with that, and it's just like I can't follow all this. But I'll try and find out what I can in case anybody cares. Next up is Jet Games USA at booth 813. Let's see, that would be right here. 50 by 20 space, so pretty sizable. They will have, I would assume, a very similar setup to their IAPA setup. Let's jump here. And so they have been getting into developing these light gun games that are like shooting galleries, obviously influenced by Taito's On Point game that came out a few years ago. But they've added their own spin to it. And so the Quick Shot was the smaller, more affordable version there, but just a single screen. If you want 2 guns per 1 screen, which I guess technically this would cost you less than buying 2 Quick Shots on the Big Shot, it's a great solution. And then the most impressive game, possibly the game of the show, one of the games of the show of IAPA 2023, was this Mega Shot, where it used this AR style rifle, and it actually has a metal shell, pneumatically powered, and they had a couple of versions there, one with the 2 screens that you saw a moment ago, and then the single screen with 2 guns. While it did have situations where you're shooting at targets, it also had this more light gun style, almost Operation Ghost style light gun shooter that you're going through, and just the gun felt very cool, very realistic. And it also had a real gun scope on there too, so like you would look through it, and it's kind of hard to see in the video, but you could see the lines, the markings inside of the scope itself. And so this is cool thing, and it's, I think, out now. I need to double check with Jet on that, but they were saying back at IAPA that around March was when they were expecting it to hit the streets. And so just trying to remember the price. This is another one of those games where I think it's around $20,000 to $25,000. So unfortunately I won't be getting one, but if money were no object, I probably would, just because I could see this doing very, very well in my arcade. I also know that they were going to be adding more levels to it from what was seen at IAPA, so I assume we would see those at Amusement Expo. But moving on, we got LAI Games, and so they had it all. I also had a very big IAPA, debuted several new games, Airstrike, Asphalt Moto Blitz, DX, Cosmic Tower, Dragon's Bane. At IAPA, the Cosmic Tower was called Cosmic Spire, but they just changed the name. I don't think they changed anything about the game itself. But at this show, they are debuting Smash DX. So this is a vehicular combat game. Jump ahead here. So it's all off-roading, so maybe a little bit like Off-Road Thunder, but you can grab weapons on the track and use that to knock out your opponents. And so perhaps a little bit of Mario Kart inspiration. going on there, plus Off-Road Thunder. But maybe with the weapons that they have a little more mature than Mario Kart is. So instead of green shells, you have rocket launchers. But this has been at a couple of shows overseas already, but this will be the first time it's showing up in the U.S. Sorry, I don't know why I was forgetting where I am. So, but I'll also ask, when is this going to be available? What's the pricing? Anything like that. Also, as with any other product that you see on here, if you have a question you want me to ask about it, let me know in chat, and I'll make a note to try and ask. But yeah, there we go. There's a missile that you can use to blast your enemies. Bomb power-up, such as a grenade. Looks like it threw that, but... Oh, sorry, had it on potato quality there. That's better. Of course, now it's not really showing gameplay. In case you didn't know, the cabinet changes colors. I like how they're saying, collect the different cabinets. Well, as long as they're not too pricey, sure. Oh, there we go. That looks a lot nicer. Okay. I might see if I can take my capture device and see if I can get any direct captures from anything on the show floor. It's just sometimes that's hard to do. Let's see. Next up is Playmind. This is a company based out of Canada, and they debuted their Playbox game, I think it was 2021. And it was one of the first new games to really come out of the industry after the pandemic had started to abate to some degree. And so their concept was a ball toss game for 4 to 6 players, and so it's this giant cage device, and you can throw balls at the LED screen. They've since updated that one, and the updated version was at IAPA, and so it's just more reliable and fixed some of the issues that the original model had. But also at IAPA, they debuted these smaller versions that use, I think it's a 55-inch screen set inside there vertically. And you still toss balls at the screen, and then it has multiple games to choose from. But from this post, as you can see there, they have 2 skins that you can choose from. As far as I know, the software might be the same, but I'll double check on that to be certain whether or not it's, like the Carnival version might only have games that are Carnival-like. It might not make sense for them to have the dinosaur murdering game in that one, but I don't know. Maybe they will. So that'll be there, and I want to say these are supposed to be aiming for the $15,000 to $18,000 range, from what I recall hearing them say, but I'll double check on that price to see if that's still accurate here. Now we have Sega, which I cannot do that voice. Got to drink more liquids here because I'm already starting to feel my voice going out. But Sega has not announced anything new that we haven't seen before, which is fairly normal for their Amusement Expo. Most companies like Sega like to use the IAPA trade show in November to debut all their new stuff, and not so much the spring show. And so the spring show is generally just kind of a follow-up, but as a part of the follow-up there, we're going to see production versions of certain games, so like Apex Rebels. And so the version that was at IAPA was only 70% complete. This game came out back in February, and so we'll be able to play the full production version, which has another level. If you missed what that other level is about, I have screenshots of it, and there's a link here. It's called Motorland Sakura, and so that will be playable at Amusement Expo. But then they'll have their other stuff like Zombies Ready Deady Go, their Skillfall Revolution machine, which I've heard that this is doing extremely well. So if you're an operator out there and you're looking for a new prize machine, I hear that this is affordable and it does really, really well. And so this is one reason why Redemption does so well in our industry, is because the return on investment is always a lot faster and better than most video games, sadly. But that's what we do at Arcade Heroes. We're trying to get video games back to that point where they are just as good on ROI as a Redemption game is. Hopefully. Bop It, the 4-player one, the Bop It Battle, I was very surprised to learn that those are around $50,000 as well. I was expecting a lower cost, but one of the other things that will certainly be drawing some attention was this Zombies Ready Daddy Go, which is a derby redemption game, and you roll the balls across the surface into the targets to make your zombie run. So this is based on those mechanical derby games that have existed, I think, since the 50s, but this is, I think, the first time I've ever seen a video version of that. And hello to Todd and Derek and Federico. Glad to have you guys here for the stream. And so we're actually almost done, I think. But if you have any questions, just let me know, and I'll be happy to answer them as best I can. But yeah, with Sega, as I was saying, not expecting any surprises. I mean, granted, they still could have something. But as we saw from the list here, the floor map, Sega's booth is kind of small compared to, like, definitely their IAPA booth. Theirs is the same size as Coast to Coast Entertainment. Coast to Coast is a crane machine company. Or it's the same size as Stern Pinball's booth. But then, like, yeah, you compare the Sega Amusements booth to Betson, where you're going to find all the Raw Thrills. Obviously, there's a lot more Raw Thrills stuff. But yeah, if you've ever seen those mechanical horse racing games, the Zombies Ready Daddy Go, that's what it is. It's just gets rid of the mechanical horses and replaces it with the video screen. Clever idea. I'm actually surprised it hasn't been done before, unless I'm just missing something, which is possible. Maybe there was a game in the 90s or the early 2000s that did a video version of that. I've never seen one up until this one. Yeah, I'm thinking Sega has just decided to focus most of their spending on trade shows for IAPA, and that makes sense. That's where you get most of your buyers. Whereas other shows like this or Deal or EAG, there's just not as many potential buyers there, so you just want to focus on your staples, the things that you know are going to sell. Because that's another thing too. I talked a lot earlier about how much it costs to produce an arcade machine. The cost of setting up booths is very expensive. I once was talking with a bowling company that was setting up a booth at IAPA, and they were quoting something like $80,000, and they didn't have a huge booth. It was just enough for them to set up one of their smaller bowling lane things, and it was like, wow, that's a lot of money for something like that. But you know, that's kind of how it goes. These trade shows want to make money too, and they're all good marketing opportunities, sales opportunities, but yeah. And yeah, Dragon Gamer, see, that's something that excuse me, I'm been leaning towards more in recent times. Is, like, to me, blending the digital with the mechanical, I think, is a fantastic way for arcades to stand out. I mean, we already do that in a way where, you know, your controls on your racing game or your light gun game, that's a mechanical physical device that you can't get at home. But stepping that up further is a smart way to further distinguish ourselves from any time that a port happens. Sorry, I'm drinking too much carbonated stuff here, so but yeah, the more that you can add that element to it, I think it can make it more compelling. And so that, again, yeah, if a port happens, then you would still lose that mechanical element, and so you'd still want to go to the arcade perhaps to experience that, if there is one near you that happens to have that thing there. But also that's why, say, motion seat games are so popular in the industry, and they earn very well. Like, if you have two games that are exactly the same as far as the software goes, but one has a motion seat, one does not, say like a racing game, the motion seat version always out-earns the non-motion version. And again, that's just because you have that aspect that you just can't get at home. Like, most people don't have a D-box seat at their house, and so that's where you get an advantage. Speaking of mechanical, we have Stern Pinball, booth 213. I already pointed them out on the map, where they have a 20 by 30 space. It's basically unheard of that Stern unveils a brand new piece of equipment and brand new game at a show like AEI. Like Stern's MO has long been, we announce it online, and if it, depending on the license, we'll work with like the licensor's website, or like if it's a band, we work with the band to announce it through them, or they'll even use IGN to announce something. But like the last time I remember Stern unveiling a new piece of equipment at Amusement Expo was like 2008 when they did a Spider-Man redemption machine, which they ended up not even producing. But I have a video of that, again, way back on the ancient, embarrassing shaky cam days of Arcade Heroes. That you can find there. But what I would expect from their booth this time would be pretty much the same thing as we saw at IAPA, with the exception of them adding Jaws. So this will be the first time that I get a chance to play Jaws. I mean, it's been out there for a while. I just haven't come across it myself yet. So it'll be interesting to see. I mean, I've heard good things about Jaws. I hear that it's a great game. Whether or not it's the next Godzilla, as currently Godzilla, if you go to the Internet Pinball Database, or ipdb.org, there's customer ratings, and they have like the top 10 pinball machines of all time as per the players, and Godzilla by Stern is actually number one. It's outranked Twilight Zone and Addams Family and all that. So, and I've been hearing from other operators for a while that Godzilla is actually a better earner than any other pinball machine out there. So, in that regard, I think it'll be interesting to see if Jaws is coming with the same energy or not. But yeah, I wouldn't expect anything new from them. Team Play, they're more focused on redemption stuff, as well as photo booths. They're going to unveil a new Generation 4, or Gen 4 as they call it, Pixel Pix photo booth at the show. They have a kiddie ride that's also a photo booth that they've been promoting for a while, but I don't believe there will be anything else from them. Interesting thing about Team Play is they are made up of a lot of ex-Midway guys. And so they're actually some of the people I've been talking to when it comes to writing my book, because I've been trying to get information on Bally, Midway, Williams from the 80s. And you know, I've already reached out to a couple of them and talked with them about that. And I'll be talking with them more as that progresses. But next up is Triotech. This is a company based out of Canada, like Playmind. In fact, I think one of the Playmind guys used to work for Triotech. But they do come to Amusement Expo with their smaller products. I mean, yeah, Triotech has branched out into real big theme park stuff like dark rides and even roller coasters. In fact, there's a theme park about 45 minutes north, or not, actually no, 30 minutes north of me, called Lagoon. And Triotech just built an awesome new roller coaster there, which I think it's already rated as the #1 coaster in America, because they integrated video game elements that they took from their experience in the arcade space and integrated it into this roller coaster. And so it's called Primordial. And I hope to get a chance to go and ride it this year, because I went to Lagoon last year on Labor Day, and the ride wasn't open, and it opened the week after we went. It's like, darn it. But it's a great place, and actually Lagoon has a history with the arcade business, because that's where Nolan Bushnell worked when he was going to college here at the University of Utah. And it is his experience there between working at Lagoon and the Midway and all that stuff, and seeing Space War at the University of Utah. It's like, hey, why don't we turn something like Space War into an arcade machine that could go into Midway arcades and stuff. And so, yeah, Lagoon's been around for a long time. But anyways, I'm getting sidetracked. So Triotech will have Typhoon, Storm VR there. In fact, I saw on LinkedIn that they have a new ride film for Storm VR that's debuting. It's like an Arctic adventure. And then, of course, they'll have Super Blaster, which is their new variation of the Cube. Now, the Cube and Super Blaster are both variations of the XD Dark Ride. Now, if you want to talk about sticker shock, as we talked about at the beginning of the stream, Cube and Super Blaster are the most expensive arcade machines, I think, ever. They cost around $100,000. And now you're like, holy crap, why do they cost so much? Well, what they're doing is they take the XD Dark Ride, which starts at around $250,000 or $300,000, and then they condense it into an arcade machine that can be moved around. Like an XD Dark Ride, you can't move it around your arcade, really. You'd have to completely tear it apart and build it somewhere else, and it would be, you know, quite a chore. But also the XD Dark Ride requires an attendant, whereas an arcade machine does not require an attendant, and so because of that, it's offering a similar experience to the XD Dark Ride, just in an arcade package, and that's where I believe a lot of the price comes from. But also, it has multiple games on it. I think it has 5 games. And the graphics on these, like, there's a frequent criticism against the arcade industry is that the graphics suck, or they look old compared to what's out there on consoles right now or PC. But the graphics on the Cube and Super Blaster look phenomenal. They're using Unreal Engine 5. They're in 4K, 60 frames a second, or even faster. The modeling work, the lighting work, it all looks really, really good. And so that's one place where you can say, hey, we've got some good graphics over here. It just costs a little bit. It's like I could never, ever afford a Super Blaster, you know, that costs like half my arcade or more. So, yeah. And then we got, actually, yeah, this is the last of the video section. Unis out of Canada, or Universal Space. They just go by Unis. I haven't heard them mention Universal Space in a long time. But as you see from this photo here, their new stuff includes a new Adams family, which is a reskin of their generic Space Raiders, I think it was called, which is a quick coin sort of game where you fire off a coin at a target, but there's this conveyor belt to make it a little more challenging. I can't tell what this crane machine looking thing is here. It might be a variation of their toy box cranes, but I'm not sure. Then you have the Funkade, which is a Funko Funkade, which is a variation of the very popular Over the Edge merchandiser, just now with Funko branding. And then the Godzilla vs. Kong Whacker game, which was at IAPA, but it wasn't working. I guess something about it just wasn't ready yet, so they just had it there to show off, but you couldn't actually play it. But funny thing is the nipples, I don't know any other way to say this, on Godzilla and Kong, you can hit those with the mallet too, or you could just push them, I guess. But interesting way to change things up on the Whacker game. I would also assume Bigfoot Mayhem, the Bigfoot racing game, which is Unis's answer to the Fast and Furious arcade by Raw Thrills, will be there. They were saying at IAPA that it would be launching in about March anyways. So, yeah, that and probably more will be there. Let me go to the map. Oh, yeah, Triotech at 404, a decent 20 by 20 size booth. Amusement Source, I don't think I mentioned that their booth here is going to be much, much bigger than it was at IAPA, and so they'll be able to cram more. Unis, they have 2 booths here, kind of almost in a T configuration, so 40 by 20 here, and then a 10 by 50 over here. My assumption would be they'll just line them up against the wall like this, and then just have them in island configurations here. Let's see. Yeah, that finishes the video games, I believe, unless I missed something. I went over the exhibitor list multiple times just in case to make sure I didn't miss anything. And yeah, there are some that I didn't really mention, like Smart Industries. They don't really do video games. They're more just redemption and crane machines. Of course, they have their JJ Bot there. We have Apple Industries, which is big into photo booths. I still remember the Amusement Expo where they hired strippers and they had them dancing on poles. They weren't stripping, they weren't naked or anything, but still everybody was just like, okay, I guess that's one way to get attention at your booth. But they haven't done it since, and so I would be surprised if they tried it again. Comuse, they're all about redemption. I believe they're based out of Korea. They've been making a lot of popular redemption games like Power Roll that Sega sells. I think they were the ones behind the Keymaster originally, the merchandiser. But they've shied away some from the merchandisers and been just focusing more on ticket redemption games. Here, this green area, this is all for billiards, pool tables, and such. Don't know if there's anything there that I would want to really take a look at other than walking through. Adrenaline, they're a little ways in the back there. Creative Works, they're into VR, VR 360 action. Hero Zone VR as a space. So yeah, it looks like most of the VR stuff is in the back. VR Park, Pico VR, Spree Interactive. Let's see, what's this one? Yeah, this one didn't have a description, so I'm not really sure what they do, but since they have a large 40 by 40 space and they're in the VR free roam area, I would assume that it's a free roam VR arena sort of thing. Same thing with Pico, Worlds Beyond, and Spree Interactive. But I'll have to take a look and see what it is that they do. If we go back over to the post here to the virtual reality section. So like Creative Works, you know, they represent several different companies that deal with VR stuff like Varbox, and there was another one that had the word live in it, or Limitless VR, which was a free roam VR arena. But they just announced a new partnership with Valo Arena, so they are going to be the point of sales contact in the United States for Valo Arena. Valo Arenas are pretty cool. So this is not VR, this is more mixed reality, and so it uses projection mapping, and outside you'd see this, like the players inside the arena, they could see themselves on the screens with the digital overlays, but obviously not on the floor itself. It's not projection mapping onto the floor, it's just you see it on the screen there. But it has a bunch of different mini games and stuff, but since it doesn't have any wearables, I think that makes it probably not only more affordable, but just maybe a little more viable, because then you're not having to worry about replacing your VR cables and your VR headsets, especially in doing things like that where VR headsets would get damaged from people crawling on the floor and stuff. But yeah, I mean, they've been at IAPA and stuff. It's just, I guess, Creative Works is, again, they're kind of their distributor point of contact now. And so that'll be there. Hero Zone VR, I mentioned them earlier. Again, they're a non-tethered wireless VR solution. They're debuting a new VR game called Wayfinder's Escape from Aurora, which is like you're on a space station, you're trying to escape it or something like that, like a VR escape room. And so I guess VR escape rooms have been growing in popularity from what I hear. I don't know what the earnings are on any of that or the cost, but Hero Zone VR is one place where you can get that. I mentioned Hologate earlier. I haven't heard of them announcing anything new. I just saw them touting their Ghostbusters VR Academy, which they've had out for a couple of years now. Obviously, the reason they would do that is because there's a new Ghostbusters movie coming out this week. So, makes sense that you would promote that. InnoWise is, so as I mentioned, they have an immersive reality game room. And so it kind of like the Valo Arena that we just saw. It doesn't require any wearables. It does use VR controllers, but you don't have to put a headset on. What it is it has 3 walls with projectors on them, and then you just play a game. There's multiple games available for it, and so the 4th game that they're making available for it is showing up at IAPA called Chef Express. From a very, very brief teaser video I saw on LinkedIn, it looks like what you're supposed to do is you have all these chefs and you have these ingredients. What you have to do is like go over here, grab this ingredient, then go over here to cook it. Kind of like Overcooked, if you've ever played that on consoles, but inside of a giant room and stuff. And so hopefully it's not as frustrating as Overcooked was. I've played that one a few times with my daughter, and gosh, we always get frustrated with that. But interesting change of pace from most of the stuff in the VR space is just shooting zombies here and shooting zombies there and just zombie shooter mania. But nice to see a change of pace in that regard. But also, like with the Cubics, again, no wearables. It's a little nicer that you don't have to worry about that extra cost. I mentioned at the beginning of the stream the Coliseum, which is VR foosball. The one thing that's surprising to me about this is that this is supposed to be representing the United States by a company called Baron Games International, who they got their start at Amusement Expo back in 2008, but Baron is not coming to the show. I'm not really sure why. I should reach out to Greg and ask him. But Coliseum will be there with their own booth, and so I guess they're just going at it like that. Let's see. I already mentioned Pico. There's Rilix, which is a Brazilian company. You might have seen their machines out there. They're all over the place. A lot of malls have a Rilix. Funny enough, since I speak Portuguese, I didn't realize this until right now, but the way that they would pronounce this in Brazil is helix. And so that must be why it's written like that, as they wanted to say helix, but different writing. But whenever you have an R at the beginning of a word in Brazilian Portuguese, you pronounce it as an H. But yeah, they have their Rilix coasters. Andamiro has the SpongeBob SquarePants VR coaster, but whether or not they'll have something new at this show, I don't know. They didn't have anything new at IAAPA. They had a cool looking booth because they had some actual roller coaster track there, but no new content as far as I know. Spree Interactive, a German company that also focuses less on action-oriented titles like zombie shooters and more like adventure VR and escape room stuff. And so they will have a new VR escape room experience at theirs. Okay, so with Synthesis VR, that's right, I did look it up. They produce a content management platform. And so they must be debuting something else new, because you don't need this much space in a free roam area to show off software. So yeah, I guess we'll have to go check that out and see what the deal is. VR 360 Action. So if you didn't see this video already, this was a giveaway at IAAPA of a $30,000 VR machine. They call the OMG Simulator. I haven't heard of them doing that for Amusement Expo. Wouldn't surprise me. You can't give away something that expensive every show. But they also announced at the end of last year they had a new racing simulator with a curved screen, as I recall, or maybe it was 3 screens and a motion base, but it didn't actually use a VR headset. That you could put different racing software into. I just don't know how that really works out. It's like you need something exclusive and designed and licensed for the arcade commercial space, as opposed to just throwing in generic racing games. But at least I get a chance to see it, maybe give it a ride. And then we have VR Park. They had a smaller booth here. Yeah, just right there. They offer the world's first convertible X-in-1 VR motion simulator. And I think they have like themed motion seats, like Santa's sleigh or something like that, or the Iditarod race or something along those lines that they'll have there in VR. And then last but not least, we have LBVR Cyberpunk Experience debuting at the show at Worlds Beyond. I guess one thing that I realized as I was going through this list that I'm surprised is not there. Let me double check on this, because they were at IAAPA. They've been at many other shows. Oh yeah, they're not here. So VArsenal is not at the show. I'm not really sure why. They did stuff like, they've been fairly prominent. They had Beat Saber Arcade for a while until Facebook or Meta pulled the license. They've had the Zombieland shooter. They have the Synth Riders VR. At IAAPA, they had something that apparently was supposed to be a holographic sort of game, like real holograms were being used. It was in this giant black container, but it was invite only that they were allowing for it. And I was a little bit critical of them in the past just because I didn't like how Zombieland worked. So I guess that's why I didn't get an invite. But I didn't really hear much about it other than it used real holograms, and that was all I knew. But yeah, it's a little bit surprising that they're not at this show, because they've been at the past few Amusement Expos and IAAPAs. But again, sometimes it can just come down to certain situations that are taking place. Like I know exA-Arcadia had a new cabinet that they wanted to debut at this show, but because of shipping, boat shipping and such, they weren't able to do that. And so yeah, sometimes that happens. Or actually, should say every time there's a shipping issue. Now, granted, usually you would still have a booth, even if you're having some shipping issues. And vArsenal's based out of the United States, Colorado, if I recall correctly. So, yeah, it might just be that they decided, well, this isn't going to be worth it for us. Because, again, booths are expensive. So if it doesn't look like you're going to get a return on your investment, if you're not going to get enough sales from a show, it's better to just pull out and not spend that money than to spend it and maybe go bankrupt. But that covers everything that's there as far as I knew. There's always some surprises that can pop up. There could always be a little company here that maybe they're a newcomer to the industry and I didn't realize that they do something with arcades. And just as I'm walking along, it's like, oh, hey, that's cool. Let's check that out. Oh, yeah, another one that's not on the list is Retro Arcade Remakes. The guys who did the remake for Ice Cold Beer. And they're also doing a new cabinet with Atari for like Warlords. For what I know is that Retro Arcade Remakes is going to be at Midwest Gaming Classic. I'm still debating if I should go to that. I would mainly go to it to see this, but also just to play some classic games. But they're going to be debuting a new food fight at Midwest Gaming Classic for arcades. But it's too bad that they won't be here at Amusement Expo, because that'd be a good time. But yeah, Jersey Jack Pinball's also not here. As I mentioned, Chicago Gaming's not here. Baron Games isn't there. vArsenal's not there. Not sure who else that I might have missed other than those mentioned. Whoops. But you guys got any questions, comments, things you want me to focus on, things you want me to ignore? Do you want me to ignore Valley Dynamo? They should have Jet Pong there, which is kind of a video game. But it's like beer pong with the video component of it. It's really just more a scoreboard as opposed to actual interactivity. Of course, I guess I should check. Is anybody still watching? Yeah, I definitely was planning on focusing on the T-Rex VR Safari game, just because we haven't heard anything about that. I mean, I was very surprised when I saw that something about that pop up, and Rothrill said, "Yeah, it's shipping now," and it was like January. It's like, okay, where did this come from? Because it wasn't at IAPA, it wasn't at EAG. It just appeared kind of out of nowhere. I mean, we saw it on test a long time ago, but. Yeah, so this, again, should be the debut event for that. As I mentioned as well, yeah, and that's, I've asked them about that, because it's like they said it was shipping, but it's still not on their website, even their brand new website. So it's like, okay. Yeah, and that's possible. It could be that it got a limited run like Cars did, or what was that called? Choppy Wood, I think. That was just done for Chuck E. Cheese's. And so Rothrills has done these very limited runs on rare occasion for, say, one client, whether it's Chuck E. Cheese or Disney or something like that. So, yeah, you could. The T-Rex thing, I mean, from what I hear, it sounds like it's partially an educational experience. It's not all just action and such. So, like, some of it you're just kind of watching, more like a VR roller coaster ride. So maybe they've got a client that supplies museums, like dino museums out there, which if that's the case, since I'm in Utah, you know, this is dino country. There's quite a few dinosaur museums around the state. I mean, there are a bit of a drive for most of them from where I'm at, but we have some cool dino museums here, and it's like I could see something like the T-Rex VR adventure being a great piece to put into one of those museums. Or anywhere else that's got something related to dinosaurs, theme parks too. Like maybe there's a deal with a theme park Maybe Universal Studios, or that would be a good one. Of course, if that was the case, I would expect them to have the Jurassic Park license attached to it, but yeah, it doesn't. Yep, and it's probably time to be ending the stream, unless there's any other comments, questions, things you want me to check out and stuff. As I mentioned too, I probably will be seeing more exA-Arcadia stuff than has been announced, and some of it I won't probably be able to talk about for a little while, but I mean, I've seen a list of some games that are coming to the platform, and there's some cool little surprises that they have in the works. One game in particular I think could be a game changer, because it's attached to a very well-known IP, and the graphics on it look modern. They look fantastic, so I think that'll do well. But yeah, that is Amusement Expo. Stay tuned to the site, arcadeers.com, for more information, news. I'll be posting about that. I'll try and figure out a way to not just dump everything out at once, but kind of spread it out, so that way you don't miss something. Because I know sometimes with the info dumps, it's very easy for something cool to get overlooked. But yeah, thank you for watching. Thank you for subscribing. Thank you to members for supporting the channel and the site and everything. We want arcades to grow. We want them to be a force in the economy once again. I mean, they already are to some degree, but not as much as they used to be. And yeah, just to have fun out there and do some good stuff. But thank you again for watching. Stay tuned to the channel for updates on videos. I may be able to get a video or two out tomorrow and Thursday. It just depends on my internet connection at the hotel. I mean, sometimes you can upload a 4K video. Oftentimes you can't. Just depends. But I will try and to do that. But otherwise, most likely Friday when I get home. Friday, Saturday, throughout next week. I'll have a few things. Definitely won't have as much content to share as, say, IAPA, but we'll still have enough to chew on for a little while. But thank you for watching, and we'll see you guys around.